Are we a better society for it? It's hard to argue that we are. Almost every cultural and ethical indicator, marriage rates, birth rates, the number of Americans giving to charity, has declined since God and religion have faded from American life.
So these are the favorite fabled PragerU graphs and charts that don't give you any actual data. Like, what's the actual number that they're talking about here?
The next one was weird too, because that's a bold-faced lie, the crime one.
Well, but this is funny too, because he says everything. He says all. What was the exact word he said? Let me go back for a second.
Indicator, marriage rates, almost every cultural and ethical indicator.
Cultural and ethical indicator. Okay. Cultural and ethical indicator. Are the birth rates an indicator of the morality of a country?
Well, yeah, you gotta have kids. Come on, Sitch. You
That's
got your 2.1 babies.
Number of Americans giving to charity.
That's a moral claim, since Adam? God. The birth rate?
No, the birth rate's not a good one, but giving to charity is okay, and marriage rates are okay.
Let's think about this. Do countries that have higher birth rates, are they considered more moral or less moral compared to countries with low birth rates?
Oh yeah.
About that one.
You're making atheist arguments.
I'm not making it. I don't think birth rate is attached to morality whatsoever.
I'm
just saying, if you look at it.
I sent you some tweets that were saying that the nuclear family is racist.
Yeah, and that's craziness. That's craziness, sure. But this really, to me, this really like takes the mask off of what this guy is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If he's including birth rates, was he anti-contraception? Like, what is he talking about? Because if you just look at the raw numbers, countries that have, first of all, he's tying this into religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at like birth rates is the easiest one. That's not tied into religion and morality. That's tied into economic status. That's like one of the easiest things to show. As people get richer, they have less children.
Yeah. Yes.
That's one of the most basic fucking things to show.
Yeah.
But okay,
why do you think he singles out birth rates as some ethical indicator?
Well, I think it's one of two things. I think it's either this guy's anti-contraception or something, or if I was to be, and I don't want to do this because I don't want to be that guy, is this an anti-immigration argument? Is this like a white thing argument? Like, oh, the white birth rate's dropping.
Yeah, but how would that be tied to ethics? I mean, I can think of a reason why birth rates dropping could be tied to ethics. Ethics generally embody selflessness. And having kids is a kind of selflessness. Like, it's kind of selfish. Well, a lot of people who are selfish, myself included, don't want to have kids because they want their time for themselves, not for those screaming kids. So if birth rates are declining, you could make the argument the reason they are declining is because the society is more egotistical and selfish, and more self-centered.
But the biggest correlation for birth rate decline isn't morality or religiousness of the country.
No, it's wealth. Yeah, no, it's a
wealth.
Completely different reproductive strategy. I'm not saying he's right or correct. I'm just saying I could see an argument being made there that it's like in his conceptualization, people are more selfish, and that's why the birth rates are declining. Which you could argue that being more selfish.
You can make the argument. It's just a bad argument that's not true.
Well, that's basically the whole video, right?
Right. And so anyway,
birth rates are declining because of wealth. We're in agreement there.
Yes, 100%. So I sent it to you. I resent it to you on your DM. A bunch of the two graphs that Nathan got for us. The one that I showed you earlier. If you want to put them on the stream.
Sure, I'll pull them up.
And it's interesting because, first of all, Americans giving the charity less is actually a lie. It's actually not true. If you look at, I don't know where he was. This is the problem with him not sourcing anything. I don't know what he's talking about because every source that I saw showed that Americans giving to charity has increased, not decreased.
Conservatives giving to charity, right?
Well, it doesn't break it down by that. It just says, share of GDP that people give to charity or whatever, it's been increasing. The only thing that I could find was I found a chart that showed what causes people were giving to charitably wise. And guess it's like people giving to religious charities has decreased, but people giving to all other charities has increased more than the decrease of people who've been giving to religion.
Like
so
Southern
maybe
Poverty Law Center and charities like that.
Well, I don't know. Just it had a bunch of different, topics. What it considered charity.
What are
so
these
maybe
charts?
I sent you.
Oh, I got them up. What are they?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the one that doesn't have anything on it, that's just the numbers. That's the people giving to charity number. The one that's just the 1.5%. That's just the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it hasn't really gone up a lot.
Holy cow! It's up gigantic.
It's gone up 0.5%, but it hasn't gone down either. Oh, do you have that one up? I can't. I'm looking at 20 seconds in the past. Yeah, the one on the bottom is the giving to charitable donations one. So that's just not even true. That hasn't gone down. The one at the top is the marriage rates one. And it's interesting because if you see that marriage rate has decreased a little bit but this is the problem.
What was this spike here? The Great Depression. Everyone's like, we're shacking up. We're going to make it through this together.
The Great Depression is when it spiked down.
Oh, yeah. Divorce.
When it spiked up is World War II. And if you look at the one that I think is the most indicative is the one in the top right. And I sent this to you last week. And that's the homicide rate.
Oh, my God. Could we make an argument? Because I'm always thinking, I don't like the conservatives. Conservatives are pro-marriage, but they are super skeptical of income inequality being a problem. And this is some pretty good evidence that poor people are not inclined to get married because, the Great Depression comes along and marriage goes down.
Of course.
So I would like to make the argument that income inequality drives marriage down and force them to rebut on that, because I'm pro-marriage and I'm I think income inequality is a huge problem. It's badly framed as income inequality because income inequality doesn't bother me. It's the fact that so many people, are struggling. I would like to go back to a time where you could raise a family on one income. Right,
and you didn't, and on a manufacturing income too, or not even manufacturing.
You didn't have to have a fucking smarty job with a
you could have a blue collar job and you could raise a family on it.
Yeah,
sure. No, 100%. I agree because look, having children and raising a family is expensive.
It is expensive,
right?
Yeah,
but the thing that's most interesting to me is the homicide graph.
Okay, let's look at
the
that
top,
one.
which. I mean, first of all, England needs to get on our level. They're pussies apparently when it comes to killing people.
Yeah, why? What are they doing? Legalize firearms or something.
Right. But that's not really important. I don't really care about England. What's interesting to me is if you look at the direction of America. Okay, so you see in the 1900s to about 1940, it's going up. Okay, then you see what happens in 1940. Okay. 1945, World War II. And what happens? You see the homicide rate takes a huge drop when World War II is going on. Okay. Then when does it go back up? You start to see in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
It starts to go back up. And then you have the Vietnam War and it kind of explodes back up again. And then it stays up to supposedly the high crime period of the 80s and 90s. And then you see it declines again.
I know it's plummeting after the 90s. All these people are rioting in the streets about.
Right. But here's what's interesting to me about this. This chart really changed my entire perception of everything, because the myth that we hear when we talk about politics is that everyone starts this crime chart. They started in the 1940s. They cut off the 1900s where it's already high. They start the 1940s and they say, look, oh my God, look, guys, the 60s and the 90s, that's when all the crime exploded, right? But if you back up and you look at the last 100 years, you realize, did crime explode, or was the 1940s and 1960s was that the unusual time period when crime was super low?
Yeah.
That's the outlier. Crime didn't really explode in the 70s or 80s. It just went back to the way it used to be before the 1940s.
We stopped killing each other because we had a united enemy against. Well, when was World War One? Because this is World War One and World War Two, right?
Well,
when was
no. World War One was in the was way before that.
Okay.
Yeah. No. But it wasn't. It was like 1917. When was World War One?
Right.
Or one. Date 1914. I'm sorry, 1914, 1918. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. But anyway. No. So, but here's what's interesting, because you had World War II, right? You had the united enemy. But also on top of that, you have the greatest economic growth period for the middle class in America. So before this, there wasn't really a strong middle class, but now there is a strong middle class because of multiple reasons, including the fact that, you know, Europe had a lot of its economy devastated, and U.S. was like a major manufacturing hub of the country. And you had, as you were talking about, you had the single parent could raise a family comfortably by having a blue collar job. That's what this decline is. And then you see income inequality starts to go up again because we start moving away from the economic model because of globalization, and all the crime and all that shit starts increasing again. And to me, what this graph really shows is that the idea that people have about this change of American society in the 60s and 70s is really based on kind of a fake nostalgia. It's based on boomers, baby boomers, who were born in the 1940s and 1960s, who as children just happened by chance to grow up in a time of awesomeness. And they incorrectly assumed that that time of awesomeness was just the baseline of the way America was, when in fact it wasn't the baseline of the way America was. It was an unusual time period. And so their entire perception of nostalgia and this sort of degenerate society degrading itself is a lie.
What do you mean by awesomeness?
What I mean is,
go ahead. Sorry.
You had boomers were born in the 1940s and 60s. Okay. This is their childhood. Their childhood was, you know, people came back from World War II. They had a bunch of sex with their wives, and they had a bunch of children. And kids grew up in this time period of economic stability and greatness. Okay. That's what I mean. There's all this economic stability. And they grew up in this new time period of this new middle class emergence.
War stimulates the economy.
It stimulates the economy. And then, as you said, America unity was very strong because it's like we had
united against
we came back from World War II. People felt like, you know, it was very easy to show the Nazis were evil. And even on top of that, it's very interesting. My grandma would say that, like, there were no men in that time period during World War II. Like, everyone was drafted. If you ever saw, like she was saying, like if you saw a guy walking around who was like of young age, you assumed he had like some physical deformity, because otherwise he would have been drafted. So you had like the entire half of a country of America had the shared experience of going out to war to fight this very easy to castigate enemy. So you had a very shared idea of American values, American culture. And my point is that you had the boomers now, especially a lot of the conservative boomers now, who grew up in this time period, and they made the mistake that everyone makes, which is that you assume the world you live in is the way it used to always be for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And so these boomers grew up in this unusual time period of prosperity and shared culture and shared unity because of the war and because of all these other extraneous circumstances. The boomers grew up in this time period, and they assumed incorrectly that that's the way it used to always be. So that when the change occurs in the 60s and 70s, 80s, they make the, again, incorrect assumption, well, we had everything all worked out perfectly, and they changed something. They did something to change something to make things worse, when you could say, well, actually, that was just things going back to the way they were.
I lined up the charts together so you can see the Great Depression is perfectly lined up with the decline in the homicide rate.
Right.
Yeah, it's fascinating.